We have with us tonight four of our absolutely favorite companies. We love working with adventure and expedition travel, in case you haven't noticed. So with that, I'm going to invite up our panel. And with that, I'm going to turn the questioning over to Angela.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here with us this evening. Yes, you all please take a seat. So I guess we'll just kind of pass the microphone as you answer, if you don't mind. Our first question is, what unique opportunities can travelers experience only when traveling with your company? Or what does your company do best?
We're doing it in alphabetical order.
So, with Big Five, my father started the company 46 years ago. And our big aspect is on authenticity, conservation, sustainability, all married together. So our company is about taking chances, getting you beyond the norm, getting you to places you didn't even know were possible. So, for example, Angela went with us to Colombia, and she got to experience parts of Colombia that nobody else has been to. She went to a part of Colombia that 4 years ago was under guerrilla control with the FARC, and nobody was there. So we're constantly pushing boundaries to get you to places that sometimes you can't even find on a map, but they're there, they exist.
Good evening, everybody. I guess for us, it's about the in-depth knowledge of all the destinations that we travel to. And that really comes from the years that we've been there. Lars Erik Lindblad started the company in 1966. He led the first non-scientific travelers into Antarctica, and a year later into the Galapagos Islands. In fact, I was reading something the other day, and I found that he actually paid the salaries of the first naturalists in Galapagos for a year. So that's how passionate he felt about it. Currently, we have 13 ships, and we operate around the world, but we really bring our guests out into the far-flung places, and with a team of naturalists, with our captains on board. First and foremost is your safety. Some of our captains have been to Antarctica for about 175 times. So those are the caliber of staff that we're traveling with. But it really is to inspire people to go to these places and come back and really, be advocates for the conservation and preservation of the places we travel.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for showing up and listening to our stories here. I'm Allie from Natural Habitat Adventures, and with Natural Habitat Adventures, we are a company that is focused solely on nature and also wildlife. But nature, we are the nature people, and that is exactly what we do. We have very small group adventures, so on average about 9 travelers per departure. So it is a way to get into these wild, wild places with a very small footprint and quietly, so that we can take part in that natural history experience. We're led by high caliber naturalist expedition leaders, much like some of the other folks chatting here. That's probably what I think sets us apart, and it's a tough one, but expedition leaders and the staff that we have and the love that they have and the passion that they share with our travelers about all of these places that we get to explore together.
I don't have anything to add. No. With Silversea Cruises being exclusively a cruise line and having 9 small ships, none of them exceeding 600 guests, we travel to almost 1,000 destinations, 970 different destinations around the world. So it's very much about destination. It's very much about getting you off of the ship and getting boots on the ground and getting dirt under your fingernails and really experiencing a place. Because, I think cruise ships these days are talking about having zip lines and go-kart tracks and all that sort of thing. You can do that here. Why do you need to do it on a cruise ship? The cruise ship is the vehicle to get you to the destination, and then once we get you to the destination, it's with those expedition leaders, it's with those experts, those PhDs and master's degrees people, and people who've written books and had documentaries made about them, who then take you to these parts of the world that they love and show them to you.
Thank you very much. I think our next one would be, what can you tell our friends here tonight about sustainable travel and why it's important to your company? Maybe 1 or 2 of the sustainable efforts that are especially important to your program.
We'll start. In terms of sustainability, I think it's important for all of us. As human beings and as occupants of this planet. everything that each of us can do individually, I think it's something that we need to be paying more attention to. I've got a 6-year-old son, so sustainability is very important to me because I took him to the Galapagos in July last year, and I want to take him to the Arctic, and I want to take him to the Antarctic, and I want to take him all over the world, and then I want him to do the same with his children and his grandchildren. And we all want to preserve these beautiful parts of the world to make sure that they are there for generations to come. And I think Jacinta touched on this. We want to create ambassadors. We want you to come back and feel passionate about these places and excite your friends and your family to talk about them. In terms of initiatives, it's everything from getting rid of plastic straws and replacing them with paper straws to supplying everyone with a stainless steel water bottle on board so that we're not going through disposable water bottles and everything in between.
Fantastic. First, I think it's absolutely amazing to see, to know that I'm sitting here with a great representation of the travel industry and the way that we're all headed, because I think this is something that's important in the world of travel. But Natural Habitat Adventures, we are the exclusive travel provider for the World Wildlife Fund. We've been in partnership with them since 2003, and that's something that's near and dear to our heart. We've already donated, I think it's over $1 million so in terms of revenue towards conservation with World Wildlife Fund. That's one big umbrella piece of our conservation ethic. But we also like to be involved in grassroots ways. So we are, helping to fund a small community school in Bwindi. And one of our travelers visited the school and decided he would fund the books to fill the library that we had built. Those types of inspirational changes, whether they're small or large, it could be someone taking their son to the Galapagos, coming home, telling his school group about that, and inspiring them to care about things that are a world away in many cases. That's, again, ecotourism, eco-travel is exactly what we do. We wouldn't do it any other way. And we're running our first zero waste adventure here to Yellowstone this summer. That'll be something that we're attempting at 99% of all waste produced from the trip. We're hoping will be diverted into either recycling, compost, reusable methods. So that's something we're going to throw out there and see if we can take the notch and raise it for our company, raise it for other companies to follow suit. In-house, in the office, we adhere to this by just reusing everything we can. We have CSAs and fruit shares and all sorts of things that make it a fun place to be, but also that's translating small ways to the field with our travelers and hoping that they can come home with, the knowledge from our World Wildlife Fund trained guides, of that expertise, that passion for the environment, I think is just throughout every level.
Okay, I've been to their office, so I can attest to that. Conservation obviously is the heart and soul of who we are. Lars Erik Blindblad, as I mentioned before, was actually a conservationist at heart, and he figured out that travel was the way to do it, to share the planet with people. But we're totally inspired by Day, but we're also inspired by our guests, because the type of traveler who travels with us, they're also interested in protecting the places that we travel to. Collectively, we've raised about $18 million to date, and that money is 100% used towards projects in the field. It can be, projects for the oceans. It's an artisan fund in the Galapagos Islands, for example. We found a couple of years ago that a lot of the ocean was being depleted by fishing. So we started a store, and it's no longer there, unfortunately, but we still have a lot of the artisans, and that's what they do now for a living. They actually are artisans, and they create all of the material that we sell on board our ships. So it's given them another outlet to make a living rather than to fishing. So it really is a great way to sort of give back to the community and also make people feel good about themselves. The other thing is we did lead this year the sort of headway for single-use plastic across all of our ships. So we are also all of our water bottles are reusable, no straws, no plastic whatsoever, and we try to follow through as best we can. Not quite as good as NatHab does, but we do a good job. It's a team effort, yeah.
So my father told me that my grandfather said something when he was a child. It's actually, we use the quote in the book, and he said, "You come into this world with nothing, you leave with nothing. It's what you do in between that counts." So I never met my grandfather. However, it's something my father talks about all the time. So at the age of 4, I had my first wildlife experience. And we were out in the northern part of Kenya. I was brushing my teeth, and the bathroom went dark. I couldn't figure out what was happening, and I looked at these wood panels, and I was staring probably 6 inches away from an elephant's eyeball. And I was 4 years old. Now, I start talking about that experience, and I catch my father telling somebody to put a cigarette out. So when I was 4 years old, my first experience with sustainable tourism was watching my father lobby tourists to stop smoking while on safari because of what the cigarette butt does. Fast forward to 46 years later, and there's a couple of different things that we do. So our foundation and our company is very much about grassroots efforts. You know, we firmly believe that the company is there to serve the foundation, not the other way around. So some of our projects, for example, in Peru, we actually fund automatically a women's cooperative within the Andean communities that teaches them how to weave. This community doesn't know how to read or write. These women are handed pieces of paper when their husbands go to work for 6 weeks at a time, and they only know how to sign their name. What they don't know is they're signing away their land. So we teach them how to read and write. This cooperative teaches them how to weave, teaches them how to make a living out of it, and every dollar generates $4 in income for this community. And what it does is it generates enough income where they can actually support their entire family and their husbands can stay at home. We just late last year signed up for a second project in Sri Lanka. In the northern parts of Sri Lanka around Jaffna, which is where the epicenter of the civil war was in Sri Lanka, all the youth that are there, by the time they're 31, 32, they're dead from substance abuse. So we are currently funding a project there to find youth in Sri Lanka, children of war, jobs in tourism, working in hotels, training them in tourism. We're currently talking in parts of Africa with concepts to be able to actually create viable employment for would-be poachers. Because I firmly believe that putting a poacher in jail or killing them only creates 6 more. And I know this because I talked and I chronicled 6 different poachers, and I talked to them and about where they were, and it was a means for food. It wasn't something they desired to do. So all of our projects, you know, the firm belief behind all of it, much like what you heard here, is about how you can make a difference without putting one hand in your pocket. It's not about making donations. It's about what you do to change the environment around you when you're visiting there. And it happens automatically, organically, just by you being there.
I have my own. I think a good follow-up question to that is, what kind of changes do you see coming to the adventure and expedition travel in the next 5 years? And obviously, we're seeing it blow up a little bit, and some of us that are very passionate about expedition travel have a slightly different meaning than what might be thrown out there lately. So maybe you can...
Sure. For us, it's actually twofold. One is the introduction of artificial intelligence, to be able to actually sort of predict where you're going to be in the next 5 years based on what you're experiencing today. Elements of artificial intelligence in that way. The second part, which is the part that's accelerating right now, is the element of, you know, a redefinition of luxury. You know, if you go back, think about with all of you, right? If you're traveling, when somebody asked you about luxury, where did the conversation go? It talked about what was in the room or what was being done with the butler. And think about the conversations you have today. I overheard somebody talking to Jacinta over there. Oh, we've done all of your stuff. we've been everywhere with you. And then I overheard the conversation, and it actually didn't go beyond, you know, well, none of the conversation dealt with, oh, the cabin was amazing. It dealt with what was being done on ground. So the definition of luxury doesn't deal with thread count or how big the suite is. It deals with how real is my experience. And that's, you know, for me personally, my biggest pet peeve is going somewhere and feeling like, A, I'm the last person there, or B, like everybody knew I was coming. Those are my biggest pet peeves. And so with my children, my wife and I are constantly trying to find ways to introduce them to this level, to this form of luxury that it's about what's real. and opening things up for interpretation. So that whole definition is changing, and it's accelerating that movement to that side.
So, I've been with Lindblad for 22 years. I would say 12 of those years, or maybe 13 of those years, we had absolutely no competition whatsoever. So it was so easy to sell. But then along came Silversea. I think 8 years, is it? Or no, you're almost 10 years. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I've lost track of time. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting times. I think the more often we can get people out and see these places and really show them that, you know, that we need to protect the environment. We need to protect these places. And especially for us who have young children, you know, it is important that those places survive and that we can take those children there for generations after generations after generations. You know, Sven always says, if travel is harnessed, if you harness it properly, it can be one of the most inspiring things that you will ever do. And of course, it also gives us an opportunity to sort of, you know, look at the planet and make sure that it's there for our children and our children to come.
We were just talking in our office the other day about an article on a new acronym, Henry's, the High Earning, Not Yet Rich Millennials. And they are a future part of this industry. And they, as well as many of our savvy travelers who have been the world over, are becoming more discerning about who they choose to spend their travel dollars with. We are looking for companies who have walked the walk and not just talked the talk, and those companies that are reputable in conservation and reputable when it comes to great experiential moments, not necessarily, again, the thread count versus the wildlife count. It's more about experience, and the trend we are seeing and hoping is that these people are optionally going into more voluntary debt for experience than mortgage. And I, you know, there's pros and cons of that, but I think it's telling that our world, again, with technology and artificial intelligence, you know, seems so much smaller at times, but to see that there is this broader, bigger world and to be able to start exposing people to travel in a meaningful way, as we all are looking to do, I think is where we're headed, and I think that's a positive thing. And then again, I think just in terms of travel trends, there is always a need to be connected, whether it be to check remotely that your house is at the right temperature when you're across the world or whatever it have you. But I think also the need to disconnect is more important than ever, and maybe not for 12 days at a time, maybe, that's great. But just to take those moments to be in wild places is rejuvenating, and I think that is also becoming more important as we all lead lives that are more plugged into the wall than ever.
You know, the term luxury travel and ecotourism and adventure travel and all of these names or these terms that come up within the travel industry, they sort of come and go, and they're trendy for a little while, and they all mean different things to different people. But I think if you analyze them all, it's about making a connection, because going back to what Ashish said about what really is the one luxury that none of us have: time. Right? We're all running out of time. I don't mean to sound somber about it, but it's the luxury that we all want more of. And what do we do with that time? And it's about going to these places and doing these things and having life-enriching moments by yourself, with your grandkids, with your family, with your friends, for a milestone birthday, a milestone anniversary, something like that. But it's more and more, I think, you know, exactly as everyone has said, in one form or another, it's about disconnecting, it's about reconnecting to the planet, reconnecting with your friends, reconnecting with another culture, another society, something like that.
Thank you, Carl. I think that leads into a good question with maybe like the profile of the majority of your guests on activity level, specific interests that you see a lot of, that type of thing. I know some of it will kind of play into what you've already mentioned, but maybe a little bit more into the activity levels and things like that.
Sure. On the expedition side of what we do, the sweet spot is sort of 45 to 65. These are active people, people who have chosen to remain active throughout their lives. They've watched what they eat. They didn't smoke or they quit smoking early on. They've exercised their entire lives. They've always been engaged, typically well-educated.
I think you need to raise that to like 70 or 75.
Sure. Right. Old is the new. Okay.
To the highest bidder.
45 to 85. We recently had a gentleman return from Antarctica who was 93, and we're hoping to have surpassed that.
Recently returned from Antarctica with a lady who was 87.
Beautiful. Wonderful. So yeah, I think, you know, it's very much about doing as much as we can to reconnect with all of these places and with ourselves and with our friends, and I'll leave it there.
So a natural habitat, again, small groups, just 9 or 10 travelers per departure. With that, we have average age, I'd say, is typically around 50 to 70, but we are seeing a lot more travelers on the pushing the upper end of that, again, who are more active or want to get to these places before they are not able, or before these changes to these places are, before these places are gone. I would say we also have a portfolio starting to come up with multi-generational traveler on the younger side, and we are providing slightly more active options like kayaking and hiking in the Galapagos. It's a little more active than our standard classic Galapagos, but generally speaking, I would say we have a range of adventures in terms of physical requirements. We try to keep them such that they are open to many people experiencing these places with us. So soft adventure in a way where these are accessible destinations, but still very wild. We're a little flexible when it comes to, do you want to choose a mile or do you want to choose a 3-mile walk? We're generally traveling at what I would consider an interpretive pace. We're not rushing from point A to point B. There's no race. We want to stop. We want to smell. We want to see, feel, experience, be a part of that natural moment. So in terms of pace, that's generally how we look to take things. Great photographic opportunities that's sort of conducive to that along the way, that kind of thing. We also had a traveler return for one of our polar bear journeys. We had 2 70-year-old sisters in that range, and they brought their 99-year-old father along up to Churchill for an experience of a lifetime for them, and you know, that was pretty neat for us to see. So we're open to all ages, family groups and older travelers looking to get out there and explore the world. So that's kind of the range.
So, I mean, for us, I think it's very much on an individual basis, and I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'm going to say our average age is anywhere from 3 years old to 95 years old. In fact, I was in Galapagos last year, and there was a group that was coming in from Peru, and there was a 95-year-old lady, and they were all asking, where is the alcohol? And they found that it was in her backpack. And she was probably coming from one of Hashisha's trips, actually. So anyway, but, you know, again, it's the type of travelers that we attract. It's that active, you know, people who want to touch and feel the destination. And that's one of the reasons that we offer so many different options, right? So you don't have to, you're not locked into doing the long hike. You can do the medium hike or the short hike. You can be kayaking. You can be out on a Zodiac. You know, you can be on a paddleboard. I mean, that is our guest ratio to staff is about 1 in 12. So it just allows people to make choices. That was one of the things, you know, with 22 years with Lindblad, Sven always said, I do not want to herd people. That is not what we do. We want to give people options. So I think, you know, who are our guests? They're highly intelligent, traveled all over the world. They've raised families. They've been on the larger ships, perhaps. And now they're looking for that small, intimate experience that they want to know their fellow travelers. They want to know everybody on the ship. And they want like-minded people, people who have the same interests. You know, they're birders. They're wildlife enthusiasts. They're photographers. You know, and our partnership with National Geographic allows for that. So you're traveling with some of the best photographers, scientists, and researchers in the world. So, yeah, exciting times.
So my parents are turning 72 and they're leaving next month for Tanzania. And my country manager in Tanzania, whose late father started Big Five with my father, he said something to my father. He said, "Good, you're finally returning." And so much to what we talked about the age, my father had a whippy comeback for him. He said, "When you were young, I changed your diapers. Now it's your turn." So, for us, we noticed something. We track our age demographics every month. I'm a math nerd, if you can't tell. So one of the things that we noticed that was really interesting was, we've got the different spectrum of couples and families traveling, but we noticed something called gramping. So grandparents who weren't taking their kids, they were taking their grandkids. So the middle generation was like, well, no, you go your own. We're leaving you behind. We noticed that. That was the first thing. And what we noticed was every single adventure had a purpose, a higher purpose, if you will. So at Big Five, everything is custom tailored, from scratch. So we'll have conference calls with Angela and her team and Angie and all of you, and we'll get to know, brainstorming, why it is, why you're going. The most important question, why are you going? Are you taking your trip or your neighbor's trip? We want to separate the two. We want to make sure you don't get somewhere and then halfway and go, oh, this isn't for me. So being able to actually go through that. So the side that deals with the couples and families, I guess across a spectrum, our clients are willing to take chances. That's because we as a company take chances. Prime example, okay? So in order to figure out what kids want, we actually hired a child psychologist to put together some of our family ideas. Not only that, we then created something called the Kids Council, of which your daughter is a member of. She's back there, and Lisa's daughter is a member of. So we literally, I took the keys to my company, handed it to kids at the ages of 5 and 15 and said, here, don't break it. And we had them come up with ideas. And we asked them 5 separate questions on a given day, saying, okay, on this day, let's create a sequence. We created, through their help, a personality test for kids called Your Travel DNA, where they can go through, answer questions, and the site spits back which country they should be visiting so they can tell mom and dad, I should be going here. So, you know how parents tell their kids what to do? Yeah, we're not about that. We're the opposite. So we empower kids, right, in that sense. So we put this council together, and the council came through and took this personality test, landed on the country. My son is part of the council. My daughter's part of the council. It's a rotating number of kids there. Then we gave them a sequence. Said, okay, every day you have 5 choices. Pick which one. And we thought that the sequence was going to go into play at the pool all day. We were blown away by this huge focus on anti-bullying, this huge focus on helping the public. So we as a company take chances because we're willing to trust people for, to be innovative, ingenuitive, and have thought-provoking ideas, whether you're 5 or 95. And from the standpoint of travelers, it's about, okay, if you want to take a chance, it's what do you really want to do? For example, we had a guest, this is just 2 quick examples. One was actually a guest that was a cancer survivor, that his lifelong dream was to trek gorillas. So he had 1 lung, and we took him to Uganda and took him at a hard cap of 7,500 feet and trekked gorillas in the wild as a cancer survivor. There was somebody else who just got back, I think probably 4 months ago, a family that went to Africa for a month. And the reason went to Africa, the father came to us through his advisor because the son at 16 had a stroke. He was put into a coma, and his son sat on his son's deathbed, and said, if you wake up from this, wherever you point in this book, we're going. His son awoke from the coma, and I get chills telling the story, pointed at Africa. And that trip was literally a promise that this man made to his son while he's in a coma. So for us, every trip has a higher purpose, a story behind it. It can't just be, I'm going because I'm supposed to go. You got to know why you're going. And if you know why you're going, then magic really can start happening.
When we get a shoe started, it's just crazy. Well, I think all of you will have some pretty unique answers to this one. We'd like to see what, obviously we think that we have great relationships with these ladies and gentlemen, but why do you think it's important for clients to work with Wallace Pearson specifically?
Because Angie doesn't call me Mark. We firmly believe in doing 100 things with 20 people, not 20 things with 100 people, right? So with this team here, they get us. And if they get us, it means they get you. When I first met her, it was probably one of the most interesting, bizarre conversations I've ever had. And she talked about how they talk to you and how they find out about you, your profile. We were asking questions to Angela and her team about some of her travelers, and the information that she was able to give us, that her team was able to give us, I wish we could get. Something as minute as these guys like this, they like to do this, or their child has this. We had a guest that was in Peru that was really active, and she could pinpoint and say, these guys are really into high adventure. They're really into that. They're really into food as well. And being able to design a whole thing. So for us, we love the fact that she gets us. Plus, Angela's experienced our product. She understands what makes us tick. So she can actually explain that firsthand. That's the hardest part. Planning the trip's the easiest part.
Okay, she just said it all. Anyway, no, besides that, we just love Angie. Angie is on our board of directors, so we spend a lot of time together, and she's one of the most amazing people, and obviously she's raised a beautiful daughter and beautiful grandkids, who I'm hoping to meet later, and a great son-in-law. So we have a wonderful and very, very close relationship. But why not use a travel advisor, right? Why not use Wallace Pearson Travel? You spend all of that time researching places to go when they can just customize that experience for you, based on what you like to do, and really find the right partner. They're not going to put you with Lindblad Expeditions if they think you're a client. You're better off with another company. So they can be very neutral about where they're putting, because they're working in your best interests. The other thing where I've seen is where a travel advisor is extremely helpful is when you run into a problem on the road. That's when you really want somebody who's in your corner, and you haven't booked that online. And they work with partners who are going to be there. So there's no blame. It's just everybody gets down and dirty and finds out the best way to make sure that you get to play where you're going, and that you're taken care of. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you guys. Whew, tough act to follow. I would say, from my experience, whether you're in the field or in the planning process, part of what makes a difference in your experience is the people. It's the expedition leader you get to meet whose expertise is guiding that trip. Here, it's the advisors that you have the chance to actually interact with, who, like you said, can learn about your priorities and design the best solution for you, whether it be to join one of our scheduled programs, whether it might be to plan a custom itinerary. These guys know you, and they know what would be the best fit for you given your priorities and your interests, and that match of things. So I think that the people really matter there, and you can find lots of product online, but you can't necessarily discern A from B or this from that without the minutia detail level that these ladies and gentlemen excel at. In the introductions, we were talking about how many years everyone's been here, or the team that you have collected, and the years of travel knowledge that these ladies hold probably is outmatched by yours, collective travel experiences, but probably it might be close. They're a tough crowd, I know. It's probably close, but same with Natural Habitat. We have years of travel experience, and I think collectively those two teams working together are very much to your advantage. We also are a very large family and growing in our small office, but to get to partner with another group of individuals who care about something like a family is pretty special.
It's because Angie calls me Mark, mostly. No, but as everyone has said, it's all about relationships. And any of you in your working lives and in business, you know that it's all about relationships. And in this case, and in particular with travel, it's their relationship with you, but also their relationship with us as the suppliers. We have each other's phone numbers at our desk, and our cell phone numbers, and our personal cell phone numbers, and we know everybody's children's names, and we know each other. We are family. And so it's incumbent on them to make sure that you are on the right product at the right time in the right place, because you're using your precious time and your precious dollars to go and do these sorts of things. So it's all about the relationships that we all foster with each other, us with them with you, and then it creates this beautiful kumbaya triangle.
We're going to sing that at the end. I think I'll just open it up for some questions and answers, and then maybe some of the ladies will come along and get your door prize drawing sheets if you haven't given them to us. We've got a few really great door prizes.
Small ships.
Yes, sir.
How small?
Ranging from 100 guests to 600.
And where do you go?
970 destinations around the world. I'll start alphabetically. Backwards or forwards? Honest to God, the Russian Far East, the Kimberley coast of Australia, the Galapagos, Antarctica, the Arctic, West Africa, the west coast of South America.
What do you do in the Arctic?
In the Arctic, the Arctic season typically starts in Svalbard, the Svalbard archipelago north of Norway, sort of halfway between Norway and the North Pole. And then everybody migrates, they start to migrate west along the east coast of Greenland, down to Iceland, around the bottom of Greenland, so southern Greenland, and then into the Baffin Sea between western Greenland and Baffin Island. Sometimes you'll get some operators that will go a little bit further west and into Hudson Bay, down to Churchill. And something we're doing this year and again next year is we're doing a full Northwest Passage. Sorry, in 20 we're doing a Northwest Passage, going from Greenland over the top of Canada all the way to Alaska.
You do Spitsbergen?
Yeah, that's Svalbard. Okay. So that archipelago of islands, Spitsbergen is the largest island in that archipelago. You're welcome. Can everyone hear the question being asked, by the way? No, excuse me, I'm just going to give you the microphone.
So you all were talking about ecotourism and, keeping a clean footprint. But then when you said people want to get there before it's gone, and I've read about so many places, particularly in the Far East, that are just being destroyed by the hordes of tourists pouring in. And that doesn't sound like a question, but it really is. I'd like to hear your responses to that.
Yeah, remind me to buy you a drink after. The over-tourism question is a significant one, and it's something that's starting to be addressed. I don't know if you've heard what's happening in Venice, for example, right? The government and the local people have started to recognize that the goose that was laying this golden egg is getting too fat. We need to do something about this. So it's unfortunate. It seems to be like human nature. We need to go too far before we come back. But I think one of the things that is going to happen, we've been talking a lot about how many expedition ships are being built and where they're all going and that sort of thing. Lindblad and Silversea and many of our competitors, both in Antarctica and the Arctic, belong to self-governing bodies. In Antarctica, it's called IATO, the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators. In the Arctic, it's called IACO, the Association of Arctic Expedition Cruise Operators. And we self-govern to come up with best practices about interaction with wildlife, how many guests to take ashore at a time, and where and when, and that sort of thing. And I think as we start to see these concerns around over-tourism or, boy, there are a lot of ships heading to Antarctica, let's govern ourselves more strictly before someone comes and governs us, or before we all start to get a bad name, or before travel to Antarctica gets a bad rap. So I think hopefully we're not going to fall into that human nature trap of going too far before we come back. I think we're self-aware enough and aware enough of these pristine areas that we're going to that we're going to regulate ourselves before things get too far. Your turn.
Yeah. I think in part, to answer some parts of your broad question there, I think that traveling for us with a very light footprint in such small groups is one meaningful way to try to explore these places, but to, again, you know, the cliche is to leave only take only photographs, leave only footprints. You know, we're, I think, in a way embodying that by choosing to cap our groups at very small sizes so that we are not having massive impacts with, you know, huge hotel chains and, you know, bigger impacts on those fragile places, for lack of a better word. It's also partnering with, again, in those communities, the small boutique hotels or the organizations where they are in line with our ethos. Over-tourism is, you know, certainly a concern, and yeah, when you're talking about species and places that can be over-traveled, it's a tough question because we all want to explore the world. We all want to see these places and these things. I think my hope is that we are raising the bar and changing the way in which the demand drives, you know, the supply. So in essence, we're hoping that we can show people that this is a great way to do it. Don't do it that way. There are alternatives. You don't have to, you know, go and stay in the middle of the Serengeti at a lodge that holds 500 and go in a minivan to see tigers or lions in a traffic jam. Like, there are other ways to do it and ways that are sensitive to the environment. I think another big one is really investing in people on the ground in these places who are, at the end of the day, you know, as she's giving perfect examples of, you know, if these people care about this place and they have a source of income that gives them alternatives to damaging this place or the wild creatures that inhabit it, I feel like those are the solid investments when they see that and their neighbors see that and the wider communities, and then they start to, you know, be very invested in making sure that you go and have a wonderful time and come back and tell your friends to visit in this way. You know, my hope is that that's kind of how we are, you know, going.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword, isn't it? In many ways. So actually, I remember in 2009, that was the time when they actually pulled back the number of tourists that was allowed to go to Antarctica. And one of our captains, Captain Leif Skog, who I mentioned before, has been to Antarctica 175 times. He actually led the way for that because, you know, going to Antarctica, it's such a remote place. If something happens there, going with 3,000 or 4,000 people, not to mention that you can get off one time or two times throughout the voyage, is a very different experience than if you're going with 148 guests or 126, right? So it's a very, very different experience. But I think yes, we're going there, but I think it's also, while there's an impact, it's also creating awareness, right, for these places. And hopefully people come back and they say, gosh, I want my children and my grandchildren to be able to go to these places, and you make changes in your own life to make sure that you're not impacting the environment. Just simple changes at home makes a huge difference. The other thing for Galapagos, several years ago, and some of the money that we've raised, the $18 million, has gone towards eradicating goats from the Galapagos Islands. So as people start going and living there, and finally they've just capped it about 5 years ago, you can't go to the Galapagos Islands if you were not a citizen there and lived there 5 years ago. So new immigration into Galapagos is not happening anymore. But one of the things was where the goats were introduced by humans, and they were going up into the highlands, and they were eating all of the vegetation for the large tortoises in the wild. Well, it would only have taken 5 to 6 years before they no longer existed. So, but the Galapagonians had no money to do that. So us as tourists going there, we were able to raise that in partnership with our guests. So they were part of the solution, I suppose. So we were able to get helicopters, we were able to get people on the ground, and Galapagos is now completely free of goats. So, you know, those are stories that happens as a result of tourism. So I guess, yes, it is a double-edged sword, but at the same time, it's also creating that awareness that we need to make sure that these places are here for a long time.
So I'll give you two statistics that are really important because you've pretty much heard some very accurate stats here. First of all, when tourism makes up 10% of a country's gross domestic product, there's a direct correlation to economic and political stability. We saw it firsthand when we opened our office in Colombia 11 years ago. You saw it firsthand going to a place that 4 years ago you couldn't get to because it was under guerrilla control. A 52-year-old conflict was ended because of tourism. I'll give you a different statistic. In Africa, 100 elephants are killed every day. In West Africa, 90 of them die from poaching. 10 die from natural causes. In East Africa, 50 die from poaching. 50 die from natural causes. Now, the key part missing, and this is a debate that you're seeing playing out in the news right now with Botswana, is the community, the local community. Do they have a seat at the table? Africa is a great example of this. In Kenya specifically, in the Northern Rangelands Trust, which is up near the Matthews Forest in the northern parts of Kenya, I mentioned to you 100 elephants a day are killed. Up in that part of Kenya, 12 every 16 months. The main reason is because the local community, self-governed, they have a seat at the table, and they directly care about what's happening. There's an image that I shared with our entire company, and I share it with your office too. It's a satellite view of the Masai Mara in Kenya, 50 years ago and today. You see a lot less vegetation and a lot more driving trails. And that's led to a direct threat to the habitat. Now, back 5 years ago, I took my children to Colombia. We went tracking jaguars in the jungles of Villavicencio. I told you I take chances. What was really amazing is how jaguar populations have been depleted because of a loss of habitat. There's 15,000 jaguars left in the wild. Go look at the cats in Asia, 2,000 tigers and counting that are depleting every single day. It is a double-edged sword. Here's how you control it. By, first of all, acknowledging that tourism is required in the right form, that the sustainable tourism question was the right way. If we're talking about, you know, this notion of, okay, I'm just by visiting the country and by giving money to the government, I'm helping the local economy, I can show you 10 different mathematical equations that show that you're not. It's about actually going into the country, making sure every dollar is getting to a local community. I have one of our staff in the office, she's Ecuadorian, she's a former guide in Ecuador. Somewhere along the lines, her family left where she was born and went to a different part of Ecuador. She can't trace her bloodlines anymore. And that happens every single day in different parts of the world. Because at some point, if there's not something keeping you there, you're having to go to a bigger city. So tourism, the right way, helps preserve communities. The way that you actually stop the over-tourism you're talking about is by having caps, like what Botswana does. Botswana raised their prices to the point where those who don't belong in the country can't afford to be there. Tanzania has a cap on how many hotels are built in the country. Colombia has a cap on how many tourists come in and who's investing there. The third part is the hotels themselves. Our stat, from a sustainable standpoint, and a rule, that metric that we have is the hotel that we're using hire at least 82% of their staff from a local community? If the answer is no, we're not using them. So that means in the case of East Africa, we only use conservancies, where the local communities own the land, the camps are leasing from them as a direct revenue share set up with them. In the case of Botswana, it's the concessions. Those places get 1/10 of the travelers that the main reserves that she was talking about were the traffic jam around the lion. So there's ways to preserve it, and it's about actually being mindful of what you're doing. That book you picked up, for example, on each country, there's actually a link that takes you to a site that has a sustainable tourism ranking for every single country. on a scale of 1 to 5 about what they're doing right. And the key question you should be asking yourself is, all right, I want to go here. How do I go here and not see another tourist? Or if I do see a tourist, not see 20,000 of them? And if you can't answer that question, you shouldn't be going there.
Or you should call Wallace Pearson Travel. Do we have any other questions this evening?
For the two ship people, we're a little strange. We don't fly. So we travel a lot. We go by ship wherever we go. But do you guys ever leave from the United States?
We actually have a trip that starts in Seattle. Now you'd have to get to Seattle, right? So that's a pretty, yeah. And it goes all the way up along the coast, up through British Columbia, the San Juan Islands, and into Alaska for the Alaska season. So you can, it's a 14-day trip. We have some great trips off the coast of California, the Channel Islands. So those are 4 nights. And we're also doing some Baja. So you could actually drive to Baja, California, see the large gray whales in the wild. We have some really wonderful programs there, 4 nights or 7 nights, depending on what you like, in Magdalena Bay to see the large gray whales. So those are probably the only places you can get to from the U.S. with us. Yeah.
How do you feel about Canada? Good, I'm Canadian. Canada and New England, so voyages starting in Montreal, for example, ending in Boston, or voyages starting in Boston, going back up the other way. Voyages starting and ending in Fort Lauderdale. Similarly, Vancouver and Seattle, or Seattle to Alaska and back, or Vancouver to Seattle back, that sort of thing. Periodically, yep, there are some. So starting in Fort Lauderdale through the canal and then ending in San Francisco. Yeah. You're welcome.
All right. And so, again, we're all around. We'd love to let you drink a little more yummy wine and ask some great questions. And thanks for joining us.